open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
All set. Okay.
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
All right, welcome. Welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today. I'm your lone host today, Tom Fallbush. Normally we have Bob and Debbie with me today, but they are both traveling. Debbie's out doing some great work with her singing career. I think she's out coaching some young folks on how to bring the art of music to the world. So, and then Bob's out of Montana. It's like where I'd like to be right now. I love the West. Bob's in Montana, so he's enjoying some vacation time out there. So it's just me today. But you know what? We have some really cool topics today. And I'm gonna tell you what we're going to talk about today. So, first topic, we're going to talk about what's going on down in the Highlands. So if you watched the news recently, or if you've kept up with just the goings on in the Bardstown Road area in the Highlands, there's been some controversy over the weekends, over basically a lot of unruly behavior of I guess I would say bar goers. I don't think a lot of these kids are actually going to the bars, but I think the bars are attracting them. But what's happening is you're getting in Louisville, what's happening around the country, you're getting these sort of teen takeover events going on. And it's happening down in the Bardstown Road Highlands area now, and so the residents are like, "This is not right. The Highlands is a nice little walkable, friendly, business-friendly residential area, but there's like families and houses around here, and here we've got shootings, because people are shooting each other down there, and so there's been some shootings here recently on that. So we'll talk about that. I want to get your opinion on that. What can the city do about this? And also, let's just kind of pinpoint the problem. I'm tired of kind of dancing around the issue. It seems to be an issue in a specific demographic, a specific subculture of the United States where this is happening, and not to denigrate any group or people out there, but we just have to call things as they are. These are primarily African American youth. I guess members of the underclass of that community that are just gathering and causing a lot of mayhem and a lot of violence, and it's we'll get into just different opinions on that and what can be done. I think at the end of the day, the bottom line, it's just you've got a lot of broken homes in that community and a lot of communities around the U.S. Right? There's the out of wedlock birth rate in the white community is now up to like 40%. Of course, the black community is like 70-80% now. So, and that's really what you're dealing with. You get a lot of young kids that are just have no discipline, and no fathers at home, and you get these sort of moments where these sort of things can happen, and it's wrong, and we need to deal with it, and deal with it in multiple ways, so from a criminal justice issue, from a public safety issue, but also a cultural issue. We need to remedy the problem. Quit trying to dance around it all the time and say, oh, you're racist for bringing this stuff up. Well, sorry. I mean, it's just how else do you deal with this? If there's a particular subgroup of people in the U.S. that are causing these sort of issues, maybe we ought to talk about why that's going on and maybe some solutions, rather than just backing into our little political corners and casting aspersions on either side. Let's fix it. America's one good thing about Americans is we have kind of a can-do spirit. We can fix stuff. We don't necessarily have to just sit around and tolerate stuff all the time. And I remember Winston Churchill had a quote. He said that he says he always trusts the United States because let me see if I get this right. He said the United States will always do the right thing after they've tried everything else, right? So it's kind of, so in other words, we'll get it right. It's just going to take us a minute, and we'll figure it out, and we'll do the right thing, And so, and I think even on this issue where we have just a 50-year, 70 going on, I guess 50 some years of the Great Society, welfare, destroying the black family, sexual revolution that really hits the underclass more than the middle and upper class. All these things have played out to cause kind of a crisis in our culture, and it's causing a lot of fracturing, and it's not healthy. We need to deal with it and just talk about it as adults. So we'll be right back here on Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky.
Yep.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. We're talking about these issues that's occurring downtown, and not downtown, actually. It's actually in the Highlands. If you're familiar with Louisville, there's the Bardstown Road corridor that goes from downtown out into the suburbs, and the area between like the Watterson, up through downtown is really a trendy area. It's known for very walkable neighborhood, a lot of great restaurants, and historically it's kind of been a little hip, hipster part of town. A lot of liberals. I mean, I'll just say it. A lot of progressives live in that area. If you drive through there, you're definitely going to see those. You're definitely going to see those yard signs that says, everyone's welcome here. My neighbors, if you're whatever, background, you're welcome here. You've seen those signs, kind of like, I'll pull one up and show you. But it's just basically saying that, hey, we're very open and multicultural, and welcome to our community. We don't care about immigration. We don't care about where your background is. Come on in. But yet that community now is having a lot of issues with unruly behavior, and it's tied into some cultural issues that might be difficult for them to square. So because a lot of folks are now residents going, hey, this is crazy. This is a residential area around the Highlands. We find there's a little business corridor here with businesses and restaurants and bars and all that, but we can't have shootings. Right? We can't have riots. Well, let me just play a little video here. The Daily Caller did a little synopsis of what's going on, and see if they can describe what's happening here.
Louisville, Kentucky, a charming place where you can, why waste our time hyping it up? Whatever it used to be, it isn't anymore.
Saturday nights are like the very worst.
Another fight on Bardstown Road that happened over the weekend.
Summer crime and Louisville nighttime hotspots. 216 citations, 101 arrests.
Honestly, at this point, I'm not even surprised.
It's what this neighborhood's become, ain't it?
Between 2 and 5 in the morning on Sunday, there were 15 arrests, including 4 juveniles and 2 shootings.
LMPD is looking for this person in connection to one of those 2 shootings. Police say they made more than 20 arrests and issued over 40 citations unrelated to the shootings.
You can faintly hear the sound of gunshots. And then you can see people running for safety. In an email, LMPD says both incidents stemmed from fighting near 2 popular nighttime establishments, Atomic and The Hub.
Wait, you mean this scary-looking sticker didn't do anything to help?
You have the same problems with the same bars every week.
and he feels nothing is being done to resolve safety concerns. He says enough is enough, and he doesn't just want to see the clubs close earlier or just see them lose their liquor licenses.
Today, Louisville Metro ABC suspended Atomic's liquor license effective immediately.
We will not tolerate behavior that is unacceptable on Bardstown Road, that is unacceptable anywhere in our community.
If a patron of the establishment was not involved in the situation, we would not issue an emergency suspension order against that establishment.
The mayor says all options are on the table, adding the incidents have made for an emergency-like situation.
The hub, which moved from Frankfort to Bardstown over a year ago, reiterated that the fights did not start at the club and said no one involved in the fight was a patron of the hub, saying, quote, "We are reaching a breaking point. We are now evaluating whether we can responsibly continue to operate under these conditions, and we are seriously considering temporarily closing our doors until the city is able to get control of this issue."
Amidst all this, a judge's frustration was seen coming out on a group of women who were arrested for fighting on Bardstown Road.
You were part of the ridiculousness on Bardstown Road. 26, grown, ridiculous. All of you. I don't need to hear anything as far as what it was. Ridiculous. Either go to an establishment and have fun, like regular people around town, or stay home or at a friend's house. This behavior is ridiculous that all of you are sitting in here. It's so dumb. You're grown.
There we go. Yeah. And so, I guess, good for the mayor trying to, shut this down. And because, if you have a couple of bars that are attracting people and this kind of stuff is happening, then, yeah, maybe you should shut down those bars. There's a thing called an attractive nuisance. I think that's actually a legal term where you can, take some action against that item. So that's good. But at the same time, this is not just a Louisville thing. This is happening all over the country. I remember hearing stories growing up about Fountain Ferry Park. Fountain Ferry Park. If you don't know what that is, it's a theme park that was in Kentucky or in Louisville. For quite a long time. I don't know when it started, but it shut down in the late '60s, early '70s, I think. And if you have family from this area, they have fond memories of that. It's kind of it was the place to go to have fun in Louisville. And I remember just hearing stories about how it, of course, it shut down in the era of the 1960s, 70s, racial tensions and the stories that came out of basically you had a lot of unruly behavior with a lot of African American youth that would go through the park and cause issues, and so people stopped going there, and it became this point where they said to shut it down. And so this is not a news story. That there is kind of a trend here that goes back a while. And I'm not trying, like I said, I'm not trying to blame blacks here and throw everybody under the bus, but there are issues with certain demographics here that are just obvious, and I think it's just fair to talk about it and deal with it. And to tell you, somebody who really does that well is Matt Walsh. I'm going to see if I can pull up some quotes on this. He's been doing some great work on this. If you've seen any of his
two so-called teen.
Yep. So if you've seen any of his work on the civil rights, kind of just revisiting civil rights, and just some of the really the damage that it's caused, and there's the whole civil rights movement and how it's kind of rewritten our laws and the way we approach things, and a lot of the misconceptions. Anyway, it's just very fascinating stuff. I encourage you to watch it. But here he's doing a piece on the teen takeover issues. Let's see what Matt has to say.
Two so-called teen takeovers in 24 hours. A viral trend sweeping the nation with massive gatherings organized online and unleashed on unsuspecting communities coast to coast, often turning chaotic or violent. In Tampa, police body camera video shows massive fights amid a teen takeover earlier this month. Here, you see the mayhem from above. Authorities say 22 people were arrested as young as 12. Another brawl breaking out at this Chipotle in Washington, D.C. And outside Milwaukee, cars spinning out in this intersection.
So as you can see, these are not teen takeovers. These are, to be specific, black riots. Everyone depicted in the videos of these teen takeovers is black. Every single one of them is committing a crime. They're engaging in a public and violent disturbance. White people are not involved in this. And therefore, teen takeover is a deliberately misleading term, which is designed to confuse people about what is actually happening.
So I think that's true. I mean, I just think that's true. And you can't just look at these things and go, well, it's interesting. There's mostly young black teenagers here, So what's going on? Now, of course, a lot of it is social media, right? Social media is it's easy to sort of coordinate these sort of efforts, these pop-up events, but it boils down to just public behavior, and public, every young person is taught how to behave in public by their parents, right? You get the mother, get the father, say, hey, quit acting up, don't do that, that's embarrassing, And if you have some breakdown in the home where there's not an authority figure, there's not some discipline in the home, young kids, especially young men, who really need authority figure when they get into their teen years, someone they can respect, because it's hard for a young teen to respect the mother when they get to that age, because they need to emulate. They're looking up. They want to emulate a masculine role model, and so they kind of that's just mom, whatever. So you need dad in there to kind of shut things down if things go out. Well, that's not happening a lot. It's not happening specifically in this community. I mean, I would say, right now the national rate of fatherlessness in the black community is like 70%. Now, if you take out you take class and correlate class into that. So see the upper 50% of African Americans versus the lower 50%. I think probably the lower socioeconomic group of African Americans is probably closer to 80 to 90%. And so there's just no black fathers around, and there's not a culture of even wanting to get married or even there's no conversation. So young men in that community, they are very often drawn to whatever masculine role models they do see, and very often that's people on the street. It's your pimps, your gangster on the street, the drug dealer, or whatever. These are the guys kind of making it, and somebody you can just look up to, because they're kind of out there doing things and they have authority and so-called authority in their community, and of course, the young women, they're also missing a father, right? And so, guess what? There's an unmet need there of love and affection from a father, and it's very often that's found in an early romantic relationship that very often ends in an unwanted pregnancy, and so then you have a lot of teen moms in that community because of the lack of dads, because usually dads protect the daughters, right? Dads will say, "You're not dating my daughter. You're scum. I know what you're up to." Well, there's no dad around. It's a lot easier for these women to fall into traps like that. So it's just a cycle that feeds on itself, and it's been talked about a lot. And conservatives bring this up a lot, and we should, because I think it's just the truth of the issue. You can throw as much money at this problem, and we have. The Great Society has thrown so much money at this problem. There's a lot of people on the left that talk about reparations. Well, I think if you took all the money that we've applied to just welfare and Section 8 and all these programs that have helped the poor in this country and disproportionately have helped the black community, I think we've had our reparations, right? It's been given, and problem is money, but money's not the problem. It's a cultural issue, and honestly, I'll blame the broader culture on some levels, because we're the ones that came about with welfare. It's this white Democrats who voted for welfare. It's the white Democrat social movement that brought the sexual revolution along. Believe it or not, black families were more likely to be married 80 years ago than white.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush. So we're talking about all the mayhem that's going on Bardstown Road in the Highlands on the weekends now. You know, this is not a new problem. I heard something about this about a year or two. There's another club that they had shut down or that was eventually closed that was causing similar problems, and it was drawing a demographic that caused a lot of issues. It just did, and we're trying to deal with it in a tasteful way, because you can easily if you go online, there's a lot of very bomb throwing kind of it's a lot of racial stuff, right? And at the end of the day, we need to look at people as people, and that's one thing. One thing the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, kind of got right, even though he was more a communist at the end of the day than anything. But he did get right there when you look at people judge them by their character. That was and that's, I think we can all agree with that. Look at people as individuals. That's the that's the ultimate way to do it. But you do have to look at culture, right, and subcultures, and you can make judgments on cultures, right? Because cultures are basically just groups of people that view the world the same way, and have values that are similar and believe a certain thing. And so we have a group of people that are believing that it's okay to go down to the Highlands and have shootouts at the bars. Well, that's a cultural problem that needs to be addressed. And you're going to say, well, okay, why is that happening? Well, what's going on? Who's doing this? Okay, it happens to be this particular demographic. Is there a problem with? Okay, let's deal with that demographic. And so, and the neighbors, people, like I said, the people in the Highlands are very, very typically very liberal people, very progressive people, and they're very, it's just, I think they're in a quandary. They don't know what to do. It's like, well, it's mostly a black teen problem, but we don't want to say that, because it sounds like we're being a bunch of Republican racists, but it's not. But we're not that. But let's just deal with it, folks. It's not let's just be sincere about it. And I do have another clip from Matt Walsh. There's a lot of people on the left that will try to defend this and say, listen, you are being racist. There are just like there's white teens that do this too, and it's just you're just disproportionately targeting black teens. So let's see what Matt has to say about that topic. If it will play.
Super predators in the 1990s. There's a lot of dog whistling there about the fact that these are black kids who are gathering together in these large groups, and we should be afraid of them, Mr. Steinberg said. Black and Latino youth gatherings are more likely to be assumed as criminal, said Kristen Henning, a Georgetown University law professor who specializes in juvenile violence. White children in skate parks in the 1980s and 1990s did not generate nearly the same level of surveillance and arrests as black gatherings, she said. In case you're interested, here's what the Georgetown law professor Kristen Henning looks like. And as best I can tell, her entire career is devoted to the idea that, quote, normal behaviors of black adolescents and teenagers have been criminalized across the country. And to that end, she claims that there's no difference between black riots and white children in skate parks in the 1980s and 1990s. But here's the thing about white children in skate parks in the 1980s. They were not doing any of the things we just saw. They weren't attacking people. They weren't shooting. They didn't storm into restaurants and beat each other with chairs. They didn't rampage through the streets. They didn't shut down entire city blocks. They didn't make life miserable for everyone or anyone in the neighborhood. To the extent that anybody was upset with skateboarding children, the concern was that they were, scraping the sidewalks and maybe running into people every now and then. And that's why they didn't generate the same level of surveillance and arrests as these black teenagers. They weren't committing crimes. It's kind of a big distinction, the thing a Georgetown law professor is supposed to notice. But every time these law professors tell us, well, why is it that black youths are arrested for crimes more than other demographics? Well, it's because they're committing crimes more than other demographics. That's why, Professor.
We'll stop it there, but it's hard to argue with that. So I don't know. I do know we got a cultural problem, and it's a generational problem. It's something you can't just fix overnight, because this is, you can do some things. You can't enforce the law. You can't be aggressive. You can go in and discourage businesses from maybe providing an environment for this thing to happen, especially in a residential area like the Highlands. So there are some things we can do, the city leaders can do. I think they are trying to do that now. And it looks like they're going to get the support of all the progressives in the city, because all the progressives love the Highlands, right? And so they don't want to see the Highlands, go downhill. And because, I grew up in Louisville. I remember, malls such as, I remember the Raceland Mall, over there, which is now the Bill Collins Ford. That was, that had some issues with, just some racial issues. It's interesting it's called Raceland, but it did have some racial issues that helped shut that mall down. Bashford Manor, I think, had some similar problems. Jefferson Mall had some problems over the years. So, they're just, I don't know. It's just complex. It's America. I think if you lived here long enough, you kind of understand the dynamics, but it's just something I wish we could address. I wish both the people on the left and the right could sit down and have a serious conversation from a perspective of love. So listen, we love we're all Americans here, right? We all got to live here, and we've got to figure this out. And it's tragically sad that families are not being formed properly and young people are not being raised properly, and it's not a racial thing, right? Because black families and historically have been great family, a great subculture in America. Back when it was a very religious culture in the early 20th century, it was very solid, very stable, and things changed, and it's just a tragic thing. We need to really deal with it. Let's see if I can get to some of your text. We've got about 3 minutes left, and the next segment I'm going to talk about. Next week's July 4th, right? 250th anniversary of America. And if you don't understand the history of Kentucky as it relates to the founding of the country, I just want to share some of those thoughts with you, because it is fascinating. The whole Daniel Boone story, George Rogers Clark. Why is everything in this area called a station, right? You go to, Lynn Station, Valley Station, Tucker Station. What is a station? Well, a station was a fort, right? Because there was a lot of warfare going on here in Kentucky in 1776, and we're going to talk about that in the next segment. But let me go to your text first, and I've got to read through these first, make sure they're not okay. Greenberg wants to sue the Kia manufacturers because Kia was easy for juveniles to steal. Closing businesses to prevent the unruly kids from wilding is just ridiculous. Severely punishing the lawbreakers is the only way to have a safe city, get them off our streets. And liberals, and then he says, liberals always want someone else to fix the problems when they complain how it's done. There we go. Well said. I can agree with that. Let's see. Another thing is, another person said, if you took all the money and gave couples at $10,000 a year credit to stay married, things would have been different. Well, that's a good thought. And take all the welfare money and say, hey, here, you get a bonus if you stay married, right? And you got to prove that. You got to live at home. You got to show up. You got to be a father. But I don't know. At the same time, fathers got to have to love their kids. Yeah, I think there's an old biblical. There's I think a verse that talks about that, when the fathers' hearts turn away from their sons and daughters, everything goes to pot. I don't know. I'm paraphrasing, but that's, and it's just true. It's like, and so we need black dads. Black dads matter. Black dads matter, right? White dads matter. All dads matter. Dads matter. That's the problem with all this crime and behavior. I mean, look, not just crime, all the LGBT stuff, right? Most of it's daddy issues. I think there's a correlation. Somebody mentioned the other day, they were talking about somebody you should date. He said, if you ever see a girl with a lot of tattoos, think daddy issues, right? That's what that is. Daddy issues. Stay away. Young man, stay away. Not marriage material. So we've got a lot of daddy issues in this culture, and it's because of the sexual revolution, the whole divorce, the divorce culture that spun up in I'll say I got a lot of boomers listening, but listen, your generation, it. You guys embraced divorce. It was like, now you can say, well, generations prior to that, we just stuck it out and we hated each other and whatever. We stayed married. This selfishness and that it's just, we're seeing it play out now. This is what happens. You get a country and a society that falls apart if you don't have strong families. So, but anyway, we're going to move on from that topic. We're going to talk about American history, Kentucky history, and Native Americans, the Wilderness Road, Daniel Boone, some really cool stuff. So we'll be right back here on Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice, and I'm going to spend this segment on something that's kind of been a passion of mine since I was for years now. Just the early history of Kentucky, right? And if you're from the state, you've got a sense of what that is on some level, but if you haven't really done a deep dive on that, you're really missing out, or you're really it's something that is really more dramatic than you can imagine. It's just one of the coolest stories in American history. It's just how Kentucky was founded, and just the toils and the drama there. So let's start with the character Daniel Boone, right? Everybody's heard of Daniel Boone. You've seen the TV shows, and Daniel, if you know anything about him, he was a Scotch-Irish, hunter. He came into Kentucky as what they call a long hunter, somebody that would come in and just hunt for as a business, and he would go in and shoot, hunt for deer and bring back the pelts, and that's where the term buck comes from, by the way, because he would. Whenever you would skin a deer, you bring the pelt back, you would sell it for $1. So it's kind of buck. That's where the term buck from. So a buck, $10. Well, 10 deer skins. So anyway, so he was coming into Kentucky before the Revolution, and kind of just hunting by himself. And then he was hired by some folks to go in and build a wilderness road into Kentucky to kind of bring in and settle. And now the problem with that is, going over the Appalachians, the British, when they controlled the country, Mr. Producer, the echo's on in my ear. Thank you. The problem with that is the English, when they didn't want the American settlers to go across the Appalachians. They were trying to keep the Indian populations content, but at the end of the day, America was just bustling, right? Because we were just growing like crazy. The average family was like 9 or 10 kids, right? So you needed land to kind of to expand, and it was just growing quick. And so of course, Americans saw themselves as expanding across this continent. It was, and let me say this real quick. This is a very important topic from even today's discussions about America, because one of the things that people will bring up when they talk about immigration in this country is the fact that, well, you stole this land, so you don't have any right to keep us out. You stole this land, and that is a very delicate topic, but it's not talked about in the context of the truth, right? The truth is this land was mostly empty, right? It was mostly empty, right? The American continent, and probably in 1776, maybe had 50 to 100,000 Indians across the entire continent. Let me say that again. 100,000. Maybe, let's be generous, say 200,000. The population of Native Americans in this country is very small. Now, was it always that way? No. There used to be millions of people here, right? There's evidence of that all over this area. If you go to India, Ohio, it's full of all these mounds that are just like huge mounds that it took huge societies to build. So there were a lot of people here at one time. And the early Spanish, when they settled the country, they found that. They saw that, like in the 1500s. It's like, well, look at all these people here. Well, guess what? Disease was brought in by the Spanish and by others and wiped out probably 95% of Native Americans in this continent. So by the time the English settlers were settling and moving in, it was like an apocalyptic landscape from a standpoint of Native Americans. It was just like the remnants left over after this huge plague. And so what was happening with Daniel Boone as he was coming into Kentucky is he was running into the Shawnee. The Shawnee was a tribe that lived in Indiana and Ohio. But guess how many Shawnee there were? I mean, just take a wild guess. There were probably only 2, 3, 4, 5,000 at the most. I mean, at the most. That the entire tribe. I mean, I'm probably closer to 2,000 or 3,000. Some of the largest war parties, some of the largest battles that we've had in Kentucky between like the settler militias and the Indians were probably, 100 Indians and a few English versus a couple hundred settler. Very small armies here. It's very small groups of people, and so we're not talking about a whole lot of people when it comes to the. So, why is that important? Well, because it takes a certain amount of people, right, to actually make a legitimate claim over a continent, right? So you're saying 5,000 people could legitimately claim sovereignty over Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan. That's just not realistic. Because here's what would happen: you would get settlers that would come in, and they would build a cabin, right? And then they would sit there and build a cabin, get everything going. And then about a year or two later, an Indian would show up and say, "Hey, this is my land. Get off here." Like, where you been? I've been here for 2 years. What do you mean? It's like, well, we hunt this land every, cyclically and every few years, and this is our land. Get out of here. And so it was very. So people have to look at it from that. Basically, in 1776, we had about 1.5 million Americans, settlers and colonists, right? And probably just a few thousand Indians on the periphery as things were expanding. So you have to put that into context, right? Also, the way the Indians fought. I didn't really get it. I didn't want to get into this sort of moral narrative of the struggle, but I think it's very important to set a lot of this up. The way the Indians fought one another, and the way they treated and fought against American colonists was brutal and terroristic, right? To the point where they delegitimized their right to hold anything, right? Because the way they would. I mean, I don't want to. This is television's broadcast. I don't want to talk about some of but just go read some of the stuff. It is just sickening, the stuff so they're basically terrorists. They were just savage, bloodthirsty terrorists, and every tribe practiced it, and they practiced it against one another. They would enslave one another. There was cannibalism going on. There was just crazy stuff going on. And now there were a few noble, Indians here or there that there we go. I'm frozen. Oop, I'm still frozen. Am I frozen? Okay, I'm back. I'm frozen. Hopefully you can still hear me. But okay, so there were, of course, there's this myth of the noble savage. If you watch the Dances with Wolves and all that, and it portrays the Indians as this innocent. And one of the real dramatic stories of Daniel Boone was when his daughters were kidnapped by the Shawnee. And so what happened is they were working on Boonesboro, building the fort there in Boonesboro, and a Shawnee raiding party captured his daughters, and they were out I think cleaning at a creek or doing something at a creek. And they captured his daughters, and then they heard them scream, and the Indians took off, and Boone and his and fellow pioneers, they basically went after him and rescued the daughters, and it was a very dramatic story. It really made Daniel Boone famous around the country, because one of the great fears that the colonists had about going east. all, and they were buffalo trails.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice, and I apologize. The last segment we had a lot of technical difficulties there. I think our switcher system in the back broke down. So if you didn't hear a lot what we were saying about the early Kentucky history, we're going to do another show on this next week, and hopefully bring in a professor that's a little more knowledgeable than I am on this to talk about it. So, but it's just a fascinating topic. You should really do a deep dive on Kentucky in 1776, 1775, 1777. You know, there's a reason they call 1777 in Kentucky the Bloody Sevens. It's because there were so many attacks, Indian attacks in Kentucky, and it was just a brutal time, and just the warfare that was going on between the settlers and the Shawnee, and it was just a fascinating. I mean, just there's never been a movie done on settlement of Kentucky and Daniel Boone that's really done it justice. I mean, it's probably some of the most dramatic stories in American history happened right here in our general region, and no one ever covers it. A lot of it's because it's politically incorrect to talk about a lot of the attacks of the Native Americans and the settling of the country and yada yada. It's a lot of complex issues, and so you'd almost have to get a conservative producer to produce it, even just to make it truthful. But anyway, but we're going to shift gears. We've got a guest on the program today. It is Rexy Karma, who is head of Turning Point USA Faith, the local faith chapter here in Kentucky. So Turning Point, everybody who knows what Turning Point is, if you listen to talk radio or follow conservative news, it's founded by Charlie Kirk, and of course Charlie Kirk tragically was assassinated less than a year ago, and Turning Point's still going strong, and there's a Turning Point faith chapter that they have launched, or a faith initiative through Turning Point that they've launched to encourage churches to get involved and become politically aware. And so there is a chapter here in Louisville at the Evangel World Prayer Center, and Rexy Karma runs that chapter. And so Rex, I think you're on the line with us, and so welcome to the program. And so let me just go ahead and say this right out. There is an event happening, I think this next month in July in Louisville, Turning Point Faith event, and so it's a rally. Everybody's welcome, and it's they do these nationally, but it's not every day they do these. This is a pretty special event that Turning Point's doing here in Louisville. So tell us about that.
Tom, good to be with you all. Yes, it's called Make Heaven Crowded Tour, and it started in Los Angeles at Harvest Church. If anybody watched the movie Jesus Revolution, that is Harvest Church. It opened up there. Then it went to San Diego, Nashville, Dallas, Philadelphia, and there's been thousands at each event. I know Dallas had 4,500 at their event, and really it's a group of speakers that are sharing their faith and really trying to renew the country in faith in God and Jesus. And it's been a big hit, and a lot of people responded, and first time ever commitments to God or renewal commitments to God. So it's been a success in all the cities that it's been to, and they'll be coming to the state of Kentucky for the first time on July 17th.
Awesome. Yeah, Turning Point is an amazing organization. I mean, you really have to credit them for the Trump victory. I do. I think Turning Point and a few other key people and organizations, I think, really saved this country. And Charlie Kirk, I think should go down as one of our almost like a founding father in a lot of ways, from a heroic standpoint and from an impact standpoint. And so in Turning Point Faith, I like the fact that they're encouraging people of faith to get involved in politics, and also help people that are maybe not religious understand that politics is more than just a secular game. You have to have a spiritual component, especially to conservatism, because what are you conserving in America other than our Christian heritage and our founding, which is a very Christian thing. And so if you don't have that as a base, you can't maintain the country. I remember Ben Franklin made a lady asked him when he came out of the Constitutional Convention. He said, the lady goes, "Ma'am, what kind of country did you leave us?" And he says, "A republic, madame, my lady, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it." And then other founding fathers said, well, in order to keep a country, you need a moral people. Well, to be a moral people, you need a religious people. And with a religious and moral people, you can have a free people. And without those things, you can't have America. And so it's I'm glad that Charlie really leaned into the faith side of this. But we only have a few minutes left, Rex. I'm really anxious to get your thoughts on this question, because there's been a lot of buzz online about TPUSA and a lot of criticism of Erica Kirk and all this. And I think that's tragic on many levels, because that organization has done such great things. But what's your take on all that? What are your, because a lot of people listening, when they think TPUSA now, they think of the controversy. They don't think of the great things they've done. What are your thoughts of that?
Well, anytime you have an impactful organization such as Turning Point, 20 days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, they received 123,000 chapter applications to start a chapter at whether it's a university, school, church, or home group. 123,000 wanted to start groups after that.
Yeah.
So it's a extremely influential organization. But regarding the controversy, I was told that there's a budget of $800,000 a week to really come against Erica specifically and Turning Point. Anytime you have a successful organization, there's going to be some detractors and some controversy being stirred up to kind of take their eye off the ball. And I don't think that group is really taking their eye off the ball. They're just growing. I mean, they went over 5,000 chapters in universities and high schools. And this Make Heaven Crowded tour that's coming to Louisville on July 17th, which you can register for right now because it's a limited seating. It's not 5,000 people. You have limited spaces at the Evangel Church for this meeting if you want to attend. And I do want to, announce, this is the first announcement really publicly on who one of the keynote speakers will be. at the Make Heaven Crowded tour. So I'm proud to announce, Tom, on your show that it'll be Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines is coming to Evangel on July 17th.
Yeah.
And she'll be speaking among 3 or 4 others. And it's going to be a great time. And also, she's got a very strong relationship with Christ, and she's definitely going to be speaking about that very intimately with the crowd and what God means to her. So that's the purpose of Make Heaven Crowded Tour. But again, when you're a productive organization and a leading organization in your genre in any way, especially if you're contending for the leadership and for society, you're going to get attacked. So this is not something that was out of left field. Of course, you're going to get attacked, and
it's almost like a follow-up.
And Charlie was attacked on numerous occasions in every way, and honestly, he spoke at just as many churches as he did universities.
Exactly right. Yeah, you're spot on. Turning Point has been attacked from the day it started, to the point where the attack actually took out Charlie. And so this, I think, the continuing attacks post Charlie is just part of the pattern. And so, but I'm glad to hear that they're just keeping their head down and focusing on getting the job done. And I think a lot of it has to do with this too. You know, we're in the social media era now, and so I think when Charlie, who was a very charismatic, powerful figure, when he went down, whoever was going to fill his shoes was going to have a difficult time. And the fact that his wife, it went to his wife. And Erica, you know, wonderful lady. She may not. I just don't think she has the charisma of Charlie, right? So anybody who had ill wishes towards Turning Point could just capitalize on that. Hey, look, it's not Charlie. This lady doesn't have the charisma. She's going through a lot of emotional turmoil. Let's just spin it to make it look negative, and just attack. And I think that's what explains where we're at. And so, and unfortunately, it's impacted a lot of folks that like the drama. A lot of folks who enjoy the drama of that have bought into it just because they're, you know, social media addicted, and they buy into Candace Owens. But I don't think there's anything to it at the end of the day. And the mission is the mission. Turning Point's about the mission, and the mission has been successful, and it's so successful that's, you know, because you don't listen. It's just like I told this to a guest the other day. You don't get flack unless you're over the target, right? So you don't get shot at unless you're over the target, right? And that's what's happening. Turning Point is so effective that, you know, the enemy knows that, and so both spiritually and
yeah. I mean, look what they did at the Super Bowl show, the halftime show. They had over 35 million viewers.
Right.
That took a big chunk out of the normal Super Bowl halftime show viewership. When at your first attempt to compete with it, you get 30 to 35 million people.
That's right.
And when you look at Charlie Kirk's memorial service, that for sure, when many talked about the relationship with Jesus Christ and the relationship with God, speaker after speaker after speaker, and also referred to Charlie's relationship with God. That was the greatest and most viewed presentation of the gospel in human history.
Right.
They said 1.2 billion people watched a part of all of his memorial. So,
so
that
needed
presentation was presented to over 1 billion people.
A billion people, and that's the key. That's we really need that more than anything else. And to think that we don't need Turning Point USA, I just point to what just happened in New York City this week with all these communists getting elected, and all these communists that are taking over the Democratic Party. If the right, if we don't get our act together and start building our coalition again, and quit getting into these little internecine fights of Erica Kirk and Israel and all this garbage, we're going to have a communist country, and they're going to come after. They're going to put us all on the trains, right? They're going to put us all on the trains. So get involved in things like Turning Point, and let's come together and fight the good fight. And anyway, listen, thanks for watching today. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll hopefully carry on this conversation about early Kentucky history here on Kentucky's Voice.